The first thing to get into that I wanted to discuss is there was some like weird online I guess conflict over this article here, which is godless grifters, how the new atheists merged with the far right. And I don't have too much to say about this necessarily. In fact, I kind of agree with a lot of what's in this article. I think some of the reaction to this article that was in the negative had more to do with this headline, in that it said how the new atheist merged with the far right, and then people start nitpicking what constitutes far right. For example, you got here like Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, and Steven Pinker, and then some people will go, well, even if you want to say the right wing, they're more like liberals than they are fascists, or and like people start getting into that nuance. And part of this is like I find like that discussion is kind of annoying because the whole binaristic notion of like there being a left and a right, when you start getting into the nitty gritty, is kind of like all complicated. So it's like sure, Sam Harris might be supportive of gay marriage, yet still be a racist and a transphobe, and then he also might just believe in liberal economics, and like him as an individual probably has multiple beliefs that put him like many places on a spectrum, because a spectrum is way too oversimplified to capture one's political ideology. I think to a certain extent, would I place him somewhere on the right though? 100%. that that to me is less controversial. I think you know we could bicker over far right, but I think at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter to bicker over the far right, because I think things, especially Sam Harris and Pinker in this category, uh, well, I mean Dawkins too. Fuck it, let's throw all of them in there. Have all done things that I would like. Yeah, you're bigoted. You're far right. I don't really care to expound on that. The other thing that I feel like is a pushback, and this is the part of me where it's like this could be useful in terms of organizing generally, and that is like when I was like growing up in sort of like atheism. So like I had always been an atheist to a certain extent. I've never, even like going way back, like my parents, my mom was Anglican, but like really didn't preach that to us or like make us go to church or anything like that. And my dad was an atheist, so I just didn't have any religion growing up. And because of that, when I ended up in high school and started actually like developing more of an awareness that other people had religious beliefs and stuff like this, I got very curious about religion and started like seeking out an atheist identity. And you can see like, so when I went to high school, that was like in the early 2000s, right? So this was before any of these assholes started writing books about atheism. They were already writing books, but I actually wasn't reading any of them. So like, I wasn't gonna start picking up like books on like language and genetics and stuff like this, right? I was reading whatever the fuck I was reading in 2000. But the point being is, I was already sort of atheist and finding that atheist identity. Now, the reason why people come up with this thing, new atheists, really merged or like emerged out of something that I already think was right leaning to a certain extent, in that it was a response to the September 11th attacks. And a lot of people like seem to forget that part of the history. He even mentions it in this article, which I think is important, which is that once those attacks happened, it sort of created a space where people like Dawkins and Harris, in particular, but also Daniel Dennett and Christopher Hitchens, had a space where their books were all published around the same time. It was around 2005 to like 2008, and they were all like openly atheistic books. And that's where the name sort of came from. It was like more of a name that other people applied to the fact that like atheist books were like almost never being published, and then all of a sudden there was like this surge of popularity for atheist books after the September 11th attacks. And so I've always because of my own history have hated the term new atheist. I've always thought it was like a stupid term, because it's like, was it new? Like the only thing that was new were like some people were writing books, and they happened to be like more of a response to like this growing, what I would call like Islamophobia. within certain atheist circles. But like atheists have long predated this, and most of the like I guess atheist literature, not much has changed. Like it's not like it's like, do you believe in God? No. Well, neither do I. Cool. Like that has kind of been consistent within atheistic literature for a very long time. So the new atheists really were, I think, already a right-leaning, right-wing political movement attached to atheism, in my opinion. So like even how this article frames it is how the new atheists merged with the far right seems kind of weird to me. But here's the thing: is I can feel what some people feel, which is that there are some atheists who feel like slighted by this because there might be like atheists who I would also say are like humanists. So they care about things like uh, respecting people's gender identity. They care about respecting people's sexual orientation. They are feminists. They are like are not Islamophobic. They want to help Muslim people rather than some of these authors, right? And so they might like whinge at this at the idea of them being associated with this movement that is associated with the far right. But it's like this has always been my problem, and it's a problem with skeptic movements and atheist movements generally, which is that they try to be non-partisan. So the idea is what a lot of the atheist groups that exist out there, they try to do things like what we want is church-state separation, right? Which I think is a noble cause. So they go through these motions to try to do this, and they try to court people who are conservative and atheist, but also like left-leaning or liberal and atheist to say, look, we have a shared goal, and that shared goal is this church-state separation stuff. And they try to use that as an organizing principle, which is that like, I don't want to like step on anybody's toes. Like we can work together, we can put aside our differences and come together on this single issue. But the problem is, as could see with like where some of these movements have gone, is like you can't ally with the right wing if you want to create certain social change, and like
Sounds sounds like similar to like Green Party, like big tent situation
yeah,
always ends up leaning towards the right.
100%. Like I saw this coming a million miles away. When I first read Sam Harris's book, I hated it. I tried to warn people about how shitty it was. Like he had one chapter in his book, The End of Faith, where he literally was like, you can ignore all of history. You could just ignore all of history because it doesn't matter. All that matters is that people who are essentially Islamic are fundamentalists and will do bad things. And it's like, what the fuck is wrong with you, Sam Harris? you know? And like I saw that coming, and I was just barely out of high school when I read that book, you know? And I just I was someone who was like attending like atheist meetings and stuff like this, and I would always like have a knee-jerk reaction to the people who wanted to work with people like this, where it's like, no, like I had more in common with a pastor who also hated church-state separation. I could work with them because like it wasn't the religion that was the problem, right? The problem was the fact that we have like laws that like preference one religion over another, and other religious people can agree with me that maybe that's not a good idea, right? Because what matters here is the morality of it, not like the religious aspect of it. And the thing that like attracted me to like or interested me in getting involved with sort of like atheist activism had more to do with like a lack of community. Like it's one thing, it's like religion has like a community that has existed for centuries where like people show up at a location and it's one way to get like social interaction. And it's not like there's like atheists like meet up at an atheist church, you know? Not saying not saying that we should have an atheist church, but like a meeting ground, social activity, community, solidarity. But we like that wasn't available for me growing up to a certain extent. And so something like that I think is important. But like it turns into this whole like far right bullshit because people infiltrate it and then they start pushing their like right wing stuff. And like once you start criticizing them, then it's like because like what happened in this movement was you had people starting to say, well, no, like if you're an atheist and you don't believe in patriarchal religions, you should support like feminism and stuff like this. And then you had wild backlash because of people saying that maybe feminism is cool. And you had people being like, no, patriarchy. Because, of course, it has nothing. You can be a patriarchal atheist, you can be a feminist atheist, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the atheism, you know? I'm late. Well, that's good, because I was just going to do a brief introduction thing. So the other thing is, so this article came out and that happened, and this is going to tie into what we're going to cover next, which is this happened in the last few days. So what is happening with the atheist movement is the same thing that happened with the skeptics community. So there's a lot of overlap between skepticism and atheism in their online communities. But there's this one blog, I guess it's still considered a blog, that I really like. It's called Science-Based Medicine, and they do a lot of good work. And they had an interesting thing happen recently, which is, so this is a tweet from today. So this is stuff that's happening. It's fresh. It's happening right now. Science-Based Medicine, they basically combat like alternative medicine and stuff like this. Had one of their members write an article that was a review of a book by Abigail Shrier. Abigail Shrier is the one who wrote the book, oh, what the fuck is it called? Irreversible Damage, and was about it was about trans boys, basically, and how there's like a plague of trans boys, and we got to be concerned about all this because women are gonna go extinct, according to Abigail Shrier. And one of the people at Science-Based Medicine wrote a review of this book and praised it, even though the science, Abigail Shrier is a turf piece of shit. So one of the people at Science-Based Medicine was a turf piece of shit and wrote an article praising this book. And when it went up on the blog, the editors, or like the sort of committee involved at Science-Based Medicine, was like, hold up, and got rid of it. And they wrote a statement, and the statement was not good in my opinion. So that's fine. I'm going to read the statement here. So it says here, book review, Irreversible Damage, the transgender craze seducing our daughters by Abigail Shrier. And then it says, this article has been retracted, see editor's notice. So here's the editor's note. After careful review, the editors of Science-Based Medicine decided to retract this book review because we allow trusted authors to publish without prior review for the sake of efficiency and timeliness. Occasionally, corrections need to be made post-publication. In this case, we felt there were too many issues with the treatment of the relevant science, and leaving the article up would not be appropriate given the standards of science-based medicine. Already, there are false accusations that this move was motivated by pressure from readers. This is not the case. Science-based medicine had and never will cave to outside pressure. We have endured a great extent of such pressure, including the threats of lawsuits and actual litigation. And most of that, I think, was from chiropractors. Our review of the article in question and the decision to retract was entirely internally generated by the editors. Further, any attempts at portraying this retraction as censorship are also false. This has nothing to do with silencing opinions or perspectives, but rather is entirely a matter of quality control. Science-based medicine is first and foremost about high-quality scientific evidence and reasoning to inform medical issues, and we felt the article in question was below the minimal acceptable standard of science-based medicine. Further, the original article has already been republished in full on another website, and anyone interested can easily find it there. We will leave the comments open for now and encourage full, open, and respectful discussion of the topic by anyone interested. And then Stephen Novella and David Gorski, who are the founding editors. And I do enjoy them both, for what it's worth. So, I don't think that's necessarily a good retraction statement, though. In part because what they should have done, and I feel like this has more to do with like them caring about their colleagues' feeling in a lot of ways. Because what they should have done is pointed out everything that was wrong with the initial article if you're going to like introduce a retraction statement like this. And I went and I found the article. So the article, if you want to search and find it, is written by Harriet Hall, and it was republished in Skeptic magazine with a introduction about it, about cancel culture and the fact that this article was retracted. That was written by Michael Shermer. And Michael Shermer is someone who I think has been credibly accused of sexual assault, and since then has basically gone off the deep end. Cancel culture is out to get him. Far right wing. So do not entertain Skeptic magazine, in my opinion. I used to be someone who would read that magazine, and I have fully stopped because I am not going to spend money on an editor who was credibly accused of something as terrible as he was. So, but what they should have done is point out here that it's all bullshit. Because I did read it. It's bullshit, as someone already pointed out. Abigail's a turf, and it goes down to the fact of like constant fear mongering, and this is going to come up in some of the stuff that we're going to cover today. Constant fear mongering about desistance and about people who regret their transition. And they overblow these facts to then say that we're moving too fast or it's all an experiment. And there's no evidence that this is the case. None whatsoever. It's all right-wing fear-mongering. And my whole point about this is, again, when I talked to Steven Novella in person about this very issue. And I was like, it's not good that you take the stance on your show. So Steven Novella, for those of you who don't know, he does a podcast called Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. It really is a good podcast. But he told me that he never does anything political, in the sense that they never like talk about left wing, right wing, or any of this, and they try to steer clear of any of those fights because, as he put it, they need to work with right wingers to get certain stuff done. Like, like right wing people might also be against chiropractic, so therefore, why would we throw people who could be our allies in this fight like overboard? And part of it is because of this shit. Like, if you ally with people who hold bullshit positions outside of like the one or two you agree with, they're gonna bring it in somehow. And if you let them in, this is going to happen. And I've been saying this for years. I don't know why they think that if they somehow broaden their tent. Because if anything, I feel like both the atheist movement and the skeptic movement have been completely tarnished, degraded, and destroyed because of all the infighting, because you let them in the first place. And so now you have a bunch of atheists out there that are very popular that spout anti-trans shit constantly. And yeah, they shouldn't have been allowed in the first place, in my opinion. We should have, like, if you wanted to take a stance, they should have just said, fuck all these people who are racist, misogynists, and transphobes, and you can not be a part of our movement. Instead, they let them in.
The real solution, then, is a multi-faith theocracy. Purely inclusive, but...
Multi-faith theocracy?
Yeah, so every religion gets their own religious courts.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if I totally agree with that, but sure. For the sake of right now, well, sure. Why not?
Atheists can have a secular court and it's silly, just one world laws, but we get better ones.
Sure. Like, I mean, like, it would be better if, like, interreligious squabbles had more to do with, like, ours is cooler than yours. Like, that would be a lot. If it just ended at that level, it would be cool. Core 10 said not the same podcast with Rebecca Watson. It actually was the same podcast as Rebecca Watson. Rebecca Watson was like on their show for like 10 years, I think. Something close to that. She's not anymore. Now they have Cara Santa Maria, I think is her name. And I still like her. She's cool. I mean, she did date Bill Maher, I think, which is kind of... But, can't blame her for that. She was young, I think, which is, I don't know, more creepy about Bill Maher.
I was going to say, she was young and he was not.
Yeah. Did they talk about this stuff on the pod? I missed the last few. No. Well, look at the censorship. Sounds like they were afraid. Oh, do you mean did they talk about it on Skeptical Guides to the Universe? I haven't listened I don't listen as much as I used to. And it's no knock on their podcast. There's just an element of like, I've heard like all the reasons why Bigfoot doesn't exist, and so there's an element in which it's like it's lost its purpose on me. I don't. So there's like a degree in which like I've gained the knowledge now. Like I'm pretty sure Bigfoot doesn't exist. I don't need another episode telling me Bigfoot doesn't exist. Although like they're entertaining. Like the entertainment value is still there. Yeah, I love the name That Noisy segment. again, no knock on the show. It's just, I think part of it too was just like it. Other things filled my time to the point where it's like I just don't have the time to listen to it anymore. But every once in a while, like especially when COVID hit, I started dipping in a bit more just to hear their takes about COVID, which was very important. But like otherwise, I don't listen to it as much as I used to. They all get turned into cooperative mutual agreements. I honestly imagine West Side Story dance off between religions. Yes, no, that would be much cooler. I would do West Side Story dance offs. Yeah, I'm down. I don't know what the secular dance would be, but we'll do it. We'll figure it out, you know? We'll figure it out. All the church property gets seized, divided, land back where it belongs, and the brick and mortar churches get given back to the parish neo co-op. I mean, let's be clear. The Catholics are the ones that should just immediately go away right now. This is anti-Catholic action on the show. I'm just kidding. We do have a few Catholic listeners, but they're the cool Catholics. The Catholics that used to run a lot of the show in Canada were not so cool. But anyways, I hope that was my long rant. I just feel like a lot of people they bicker too much about like whether or not atheists should be right wing or not, and it's like atheism should not be the single focal point or rallying point for a lot of these things. Like I get the necessity in terms of like fighting particular causes, like again, church-state separation or not trying to prioritize one religion over the other. And there are certain cases where atheists are discriminated against. I don't want to say that like you know, not that I want to play like some sort of victim game kind of thing, right? Like other people clearly have it worse than atheists nowadays, I think. But the point being is like atheism discrimination does still occur in certain sectors. So it's like important to still like care about that as an issue, but realize that like allying with right-wingers that hold other shitty views and letting them into your like more community spaces is not going to make your movements better. In fact, it's going to eat your movements alive. So keep them out. That's my message.
Hello, my rebels. Hello, my rebels. I'm a good boy. I'm a weirdo.